CEO dismisses janitor for lacking a degree, but what happened next will leave you astonished. Ethan Collins glanced across the sleek, glass-walled office of Apex Innovations as chaos unfolded outside. It was Monday morning, the city buzzing with life, but all he felt was a tightening in his chest. The startup he had built was now a multi-million-dollar titan, yet beneath the gleaming surface of success, there was an unsettling disquiet. He felt it pulsing through the air like electricity. In his mind, formal education equated pure value, a belief he had lived by since childhood. So when he summarily dismissed Julia Sanchez, the company's janitor, for lacking a degree, his heart didn't even twitch. "Unfit for my workplace," he had said without a second thought. Her lack of credentials had been the dagger he used to make his decision, clean and clinically efficient. The moment he delivered the final word, Julia's face fell, revealing a raw vulnerability he had never considered. He'd seen her sweeping the floors and emptying the trash. To him, she existed in the background. As he watched her shuffle away, a pang of guilt cut through him, though he quickly shoved it aside. "It's just business," he muttered, though doubt echoed in his mind. Could he justify the choice he made for the company amid the flood of photos and testimonials plastered across social media? Julia was just a janitor after all. But as the day progressed, unease bubbled within him, feeding on fragments of his own self-doubt. He thought about his early struggles, those moments when his own worth felt tethered solely to his education, leaving him grappling with inadequacy no one else could see. Being a self-made man, he had devoted every ounce of himself to success, and yet, in the back of his mind, his justification teetered on shaky ground. Could success really be determined solely by titles and degrees? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The phone buzzed at his desk, jolting him from spiraling thoughts. As he distractedly scrolled through social media, he choked on his coffee at the unexpected sight of Julia's artwork trending. There she was, her paintings vibrant and full of raw emotion, garnering attention from art lovers and collectors alike. A movement was budding, fueled by her tenacity, the very grit he had dared to overlook. Each like on those posts taunted him, held him captive to the painful realization that he had severed the branch of potential growth beneath him. Deep in thought, he could feel the walls of his carefully crafted ideals starting to cave in. The contrast stung, Julia's passion igniting while he remained shackled to his sterile corporate ideals. As he watched her fame grow, he felt a hollow ache crystallizing in his gut. The more successful she became, the more he questioned himself, his decisions, and who he was as a leader. In the lavish art gallery, a crowd congregated, captivated by Julia's work. They marveled at the beauty born from pain, creating ripples of energy that curled around the room. Sweating under the weight of judgment, Ethan found himself standing before her, an ocean of uncertainty swirling within him. "I had no idea," he faltered. But she cut him off with a steely gaze, and memories surged through her. Dreams unfulfilled, a life sculpted into determination for her daughter. "What does it really mean to deserve success?" she asked, her voice drawing the audience in, and the tension in the air tightened around Ethan like a noose that showed no mercy. What he once considered a clear-cut path of achievement suddenly felt like a dark abyss. As he wrestled with the question, everything he believed about success turned on itself, leaving his future dangling precariously amidst the gathering storm of emotions and unrecognized truths. Ethan stood in the radiant glow of Julia's art, but the beauty of her creations felt like shards of glass piercing through his carefully constructed armor. He turned away, not wanting anyone to witness the shift within him, the deconstruction of complacent beliefs that had defined his career and identity. He needed air, space to think, and as he slipped outside into the cool night, the sounds of the gallery faded into the distance, replaced by the rhythmic pulse of his own heartbeat. What did it mean to deserve success? The question echoed through his mind like a siren. Success had always been about hustle, ambition, and adhering to the authoritative voice of proven benchmarks, degrees, titles, awards. Yet Julia's art vibrated with authenticity, suggesting a depth of experience and passion that he had never considered could compete with his business acumen. It fed an unsettling thought. Perhaps value could exist outside his prescribed metrics. He paced along the empty street lined with glimmering storefronts, the city alight with promise. Yet Ethan felt trapped in a sense of inadequacy. He grappled with an unfamiliar sensation, vulnerability. The further he distanced himself from the gallery, the more he confronted his fear of failure. What if his own achievements were hollow? What if he, like Julia, had unfulfilled aspirations hidden beneath the surface? A barista waved to him from a nearby cafe, an earnest smile on her face as she served late-night customers. He caught her eye and was struck by how she, too, contributed to the tapestry of the city's pulse, just as Julia had done with her art. She didn't need a degree to bring joy, creativity, or purpose to her work. Ethan remembered the fire in Julia's eyes while she spoke, a fierce ownership of her dreams. Why hadn't he seen that before? Without thinking, he stepped into the cafe. As the rich aroma of coffee enveloped him, Ethan felt a need to connect, to seek answers. What makes a person worthy of success? He found himself asking the barista, who blinked in surprise. She regarded him thoughtfully, her expression shifting from surprise to empathy. I think it's about the effort you put in and the passion you carry. Success isn't a checklist, it's what you create out of your journey, she replied, her voice steady and sincere. The simplicity of her answer struck him, reverberating in the corners of his mind. He realized that he had been racing forward, blinded by ambition and the pursuit of traditional accolades while failing to appreciate the more intricate definitions of achievement. It was a process, a discovery, a journey informed by myriad experiences, not merely a result outlined on a resume. As he sipped his coffee, the warmth coursed through him, and he made a decision. He would reach out to Julia. He would not only apologize but also offer her a platform within his company. Perhaps she could teach others what he had neglected to see. The beauty of authenticity, of talent unhindered by rigid expectations. But with every resolve came a swell of anxiety. Would Julia even accept him after the way he'd dismissed her? The thought of facing her and the potential backlash gnawed at him, yet he found a flicker of determination igniting within. Ethan left the cafe and headed back toward the gallery, heart racing. As he approached the entrance, he noticed Julia slipping into the night, her silhouette disappearing into the urban landscape. The moment had come to face not just Julia but the deeper questions about his own leadership, his values, and his past decisions. Suddenly, everything felt unsteady beneath him, and he hesitated, his hand hovering over the door. Would he have the courage to redefine success and extend an olive branch when he felt so vulnerable himself? Uncertainty gripped him as he stepped back into the night, the weight of his choices pressing down. There was no turning back. He was about to embark on a journey of discovery that would challenge everything he held dear. What awaited him beyond that threshold? Ethan leaned against the cool brick wall of the gallery, his breath visible in the chilly night air as his thoughts spiraled. He had spent years cultivating a persona built on achievement, yet here he was, teetering on the precipice of change, confronted with the realization that perhaps he had been measuring success with the wrong metrics. The question loomed over him like an impending storm. Could he truly change the narrative of his life, of his career? With each passing second, the nagging sense of doubt transformed into resolve. He needed to act. He had to confront Julia, not only to apologize but to invite her into a new vision for his company. The opportunity to integrate her authentic approach into his world of rigid titles and qualifications pulsed within him like a heartbeat. A call to redefine his understanding of talent beyond mere accolades or conventional pathways. As he walked, the city brightened around him with a foreign vibrancy, a world of potential that had often slipped by unnoticed. Ethan had been so focused on climbing the corporate ladder that he had neglected the simple joys inherent in genuine connections. Each conversation, each interaction was a brushstroke on a vast canvas, and he had been painting with limited colors. Pausing at a crossroads, he considered his professional life, bound in a cocoon of strategy and analytics, where feeling and intuition had been relegated to the periphery. His meetings were filled with charts and projections, yet the most significant moments were found in the unquantifiable, the laughter shared with colleagues, the inspiration drawn from diverse perspectives, the raw passion of creativity that he had shunned in favor of pragmatism. His phone buzzed in his pocket, jolting him from his reflections. It was a message from a close colleague who praised their latest project, a testament to Ethan's diligence and hard work. Yet an ache stirred within him. Was this the essence of his journey, or was there something deeper to pursue? The accolades felt empty against the backdrop of his recent revelations. Determined, he navigated back toward Julia's neighborhood, replaying their conversation in his mind. Her eyes, alight with fervor, ignited a flicker of excitement within him. The opportunity to champion warmth, humanity, and daring creativity filled him with an urgency he had not felt in years. He refused to let fear dictate his next steps any longer. Arriving on her street, he hesitated. The last moments before confrontation bubbled with a conflicting mix of anticipation and dread. What if she rejected his overture? What if his attempt to breach her world of art fell flat? Yet, another thought volleyed at him. What if she resonated with his struggles, understood his journey, and welcomed the possibility of collaboration? He spotted Julia standing by her studio, her silhouette framed by the soft golden light spilling from its windows. A wave of uncertainty swept over him again, but the thought of remaining stagnant under the weight of regret propelled him forward. "Julia," he called out, his voice breaking the still air between them. She turned, surprise darting across her features. As she walked towards him, he saw the apprehension clouding her eyes, mirroring his own doubts. "Ethan?" she responded, her tone cautious, but there was a hint of curiosity bubbling beneath it. Taking a deep breath, he steadied himself. Here was the moment where he could either revert to familiar patterns or dive into the unknown, embracing vulnerability as the cornerstone of a new direction. Heart pounding, he began to talk, to reveal his shifting understanding of success, to open the door to a conversation that could reshape both their paths. Little did he know, the atmosphere that night would soon thrum with revelations beyond his comprehension, leading him to question everything he thought he knew about success and self-worth. He stood on the brink of transformation, but contrasts lay ahead, igniting a battle between his past and an uncertain future. What would Julia's response unveil about him? Ethan stood before Julia, the weight of the moment pressing down like unseen anchors. He could feel the air between them crackling with unspoken questions. Would she understand his desire to pivot? Would she even want to engage with someone whose credentials stood in stark contrast to her own authenticity? As he pulled a shaky breath, his thoughts churned. This wasn't merely about business for him. It was about a fundamental shift in his understanding of value. "Julia, I've been thinking," he started, words tumbling out in a rush, "about how I measure success. I've chased titles and numbers, believing they defined my worth, but I've realized that it's not that simple. It's about the impact we create, the stories we tell, and the connections we forge." His heart raced as he watched her expression shift from surprise to caution. Every beat felt like a drum signaling his resolve. Julia's artistic journey had in many ways defied conventional paths, and he wondered if she sensed the vulnerability in his voice. "I want you to collaborate with me," he continued, searching her eyes for understanding. "I see potential in your approach, the way you see the world. My company, my vision, it could benefit from that. More than just making a profit, we could create something meaningful together." A flicker of interest danced across her features, but it was quickly veiled by skepticism. Ethan could feel the chasm that had formed from years of rigid corporate culture standing between them, and he sensed her hesitation was as much about him as it was about the system they had both been part of. "Ethan," she replied slowly, her voice steady yet tinged with uncertainty. "What you're talking about isn't just a shift in vision. It's about changing the entire system you're entrenched in. Do you really think you can do that?" Her question was sharp, cutting through his enthusiasm like a knife. It was a challenge, no doubt, a challenge he couldn't afford to shy away from. He had come too far down this road of self-discovery, his mind brimming with fresh perspectives. This wasn't merely an invitation to collaborate. This was his chance to dismantle the walls he had built around himself. "Yes," he said with newfound conviction, "I do believe I can. But I need you, Julia. I need your voice, your authenticity, and your creativity to help me navigate this. Together, we can redefine success, not just for my company, but for all of us who have been trapped by outdated metrics. We owe it to ourselves to try." As the words left his mouth, he felt a strange mix of exhilaration and fear. Could he truly initiate this transformation? The visions he used to dismiss as unrealistic filled his mind once again, and he felt the stakes rising. She studied him, the tension stretching between them like a tightly wound wire on the verge of snapping. Suddenly, an unexpected clarity washed over him. This wasn't just about the business. It was about rediscovering who he was beneath the weight of expectations and perceptions. "Ethan," Julia finally responded, and her voice carried a warmth that softened the air. "If you're serious about this, you need to understand what being vulnerable truly means. You'll have to embrace the chaos and uncertainty that comes with creative endeavors." Her words struck a chord inside him, a realization that this wasn't merely a professional risk. It was a personal metamorphosis, a chance to shed the skin that had confined him for so long. But would he possess the courage to abandon the safety of his old metrics and navigate the uncharted waters of genuine connection and creativity? "I'm ready to face that chaos," he affirmed, heart pounding fiercely. "But I need your guidance." A silence settled, heavy yet pregnant with possibilities. "Then let's take the first step together. But remember, Ethan, nothing is guaranteed. It will require more than just talk. It demands the faith to act." As she spoke, a surge of determination coursed through him. This was the beginning of something profound, yet he felt the ground beneath shifting unpredictably. What awaited him on the other side of this leap of faith? In that moment, the stakes felt higher than ever. But what Ethan didn't yet grasp was that this journey would unravel deep familial expectations and a reckoning that would haunt him. The road ahead loomed daunting, layered with complexity and doubt, yet it pulsed with a raw, untamed potential he had never tapped into before. How would this new dawn challenge the very fabric of who he had been? Ethan awoke the next morning with a mix of anticipation and anxiety swirling within him. The sun streamed through his window, illuminating the clutter of papers and reports that constituted his former life, a stark contrast to the fresh perspective he now sought to embrace. He poured himself a cup of coffee, the familiar routine now seeming almost alien, as if he were preparing for battle rather than breakfast. He thought back to Julia's words, feeling them anchor themselves deeper into his psyche. Faith to act. What did that mean when the stakes were more than just business? His mind raced with reflections of past decisions made for the sake of security rather than creativity. Success measured by financial metrics had left him hollow. The realization that a different kind of success existed was both exhilarating and terrifying. As he slipped on his jacket and stepped out the door, Ethan felt the weight of transformation hovering over him. This day meant more than any board meeting or presentation he had ever prepared for. He was stepping into the unknown, a territory fraught with unresolved emotions and uncharted potential. The office felt different as he walked through its doors again. A sense of urgency buzzed in the air, heightened by the unfamiliar commitment he now held to influence change. His team greeted him with smiles, though their eyes betrayed a lingering confusion about the drastic decisions he hinted at in their last meeting. Ethan settled into his chair, aware that he had not just a responsibility to them, but also to himself. He turned to his computer, pulling up a blank document in a shared setting that would mirror his discussions with Julia. The plan began to take shape, not as a rigid outline but as a dynamic vision. He envisioned community, creativity, and connection at the forefront. This wasn't about numbers anymore. It was about weaving stories of innovation and actual impact. He began typing, his fingers racing against the keyboard as words flowed in a newfound clarity. Yet amid the excitement, shadows loomed in the corners of his mind. Deep-seated fear clutched at his resolve. Would his team resonate with this shift, or would they cling to the comfort of the traditional metrics they had always known? Would Julia's insights forge pathways, or would he encounter resistance from the very structures he aimed to dismantle? By noon, he felt the urge to reach out to Julia. Their conversation replayed in his head like a mantra, stirring a blend of admiration and apprehension. She had challenged him, pushed him to confront his vulnerabilities, and for that, he felt grateful. So, with a pounding heart, he resolutely dialed her number. "Ethan, you sound different," Julia remarked after the usual pleasantries. "I am different," he replied, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "I've been sketching a framework for our project. I need your feedback, your ideas." "That's a good start, but it'll take more than sketches. Are you prepared for unpredictable outcomes?" she pressed, a challenge echoing through the phone. "More than ever," he admitted, taking a deep breath. "But I can't do it alone." As they exchanged ideas, his confidence began to swell. Each suggestion Julia offered seemed like fuel, igniting a flame of creativity in him that he hadn't realized existed. But with each exchange, ghostly reminders of his past began to creep in. Colleagues who had dismissed creativity as a luxury, and family members who had instilled the belief that security reigned supreme over passion. With Julia's support, Ethan began to strategize a team meeting to present their joint vision. But a nagging doubt lingered. What if his colleagues rejected this newfound approach? Would they send him back to the realm of numbers and titles he was so desperate to escape? As he finalized plans for the meeting, sudden clarity washed over him. The looming confrontation was not just professional, it was deeply personal. He was not merely appealing to a group of adults, he was dismantling a paradigm that ensnared him. And with that came the harsh reality of losing approval, not just from his team, but perhaps from his family as well. Ethan slumped back in his chair, grappling with the stakes that now felt insurmountable. This journey forward felt both like a liberation and a perilous risk. In the quiet moments that followed, a single question echoed in his mind. Would he really embrace the chaotic beauty of creativity at the sacrifice of acceptance? The clock ticked loudly in the silence, reminding him that the time for his leap of faith was drawing near. Soon, he would have to confront not just his colleagues but also the voice of self-doubt that had haunted him for far too long. How would he navigate the crossroads between authenticity and validation? Ethan spent the night wrestling with his thoughts, exhaustion mixed with an exhilarating tension that wouldn't let him sleep. With dawn soon breaking, he had crafted an outline for the meeting, yet felt its grasping imperfections. Each point seemed polished on the surface but neglected to address the underlying emotional currents threatening to destabilize his ambitious vision. As he prepared his presentation, his mind spiraled back to Julia's probing questions. Unpredictable outcomes. His heart raced again, but this time with purpose. He could shape the narrative affecting his team and himself by embracing the very chaos he feared. Perhaps that was the key to unlocking transformative ideas, both for his project and for his inner conflict. Arriving at the office, a rapid pulse coursed through him, heightening every sound. The click of shoes, hushed conversations, the whir of the coffee machine. The air felt electric, the potential palpable. He was just steps away from sharing his vision, yet the fear of inadequacy pressed heavier than before. As colleagues trickled into the conference room, Ethan's anxiety began to shift into focused determination. Sitting before them, all eyes turned toward him. He was not merely an employee anymore. He sensed the urgency in the air, an unsaid expectation for clarity amidst the storm he was about to unleash. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "Today, I want to talk about where we can go, not just as a team, but as a community of creators. We've been measuring success through numbers, and while they matter, they don't tell the whole story." He glanced at their faces, seeking confirmation, but finding a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. He took a breath, centering himself. It was time to bridge the gap between the old world of rigid metrics and new possibilities anchored in creativity and connection. With each point he made, he illustrated not just the initiatives but also the emotional fabric that could tie their professional lives to a narrative worth pursuing. Ideas of storytelling, collaboration, and genuine engagement began to flow from him, painting a vision from the chaos in his mind. Words like innovative and impactful danced from his lips, believed more than ever. Yet the shadows of doubt still loomed. Ethan faced the question buried deep in their environment. Would they see the value in this change, or would they remain entrapped in the familiar? As silence lingered after his presentation, he felt like a tightrope walker just waiting for the ground to crumble beneath him. Finally, Sarah, one of his longest-standing team members, broke the stillness. "Ethan, these ideas, they're bold, but it sounds risky. How will we measure success without the usual KPIs?" The familiar cadence of conventional wisdom rose up, challenging him. "Does success have to be measured solely in numbers?" he countered, adrenaline coursing through him. A hesitant murmur spread around the room as he sensed a turning point. But just then, Brian, a finance director with a reputation for being grounded, chimed in. "If we let go of our core metrics without a backup plan, we're putting our jobs on the line." Ethan's heart began racing once more, but with it came a rush of clarity. What if we redefine those metrics? They could include team engagement, innovation rates, and community impact. Isn't that worth the risk? The dialogue that followed was charged, an exchange of fears and aspirations that illuminated a path Ethan hadn't dared hope for. As he navigated the pushback, he realized that each question revealed more about his own journey toward authenticity. This was no longer about numbers. This was about crafting a story together. And with each voice in the room actively participating, it felt like they were collectively unshackling themselves from the past, not just Ethan. But as he spoke, an unsettling truth flickered in his mind. Could he truly inspire them while still battling his insecurities? Was he leading this courageous charge, or merely following the embers of rebellion? As they wrapped up, Ethan understood that his journey was just beginning. The meeting had thrown open the door to a conversation he had feared, yet longed for. Now came the hardest part, navigating the decisions that could jeopardize not only his professional identity, but his sense of self. Acceptance versus authenticity. As he stepped out of the conference room, he realized one undeniable truth. The bigger gamble had yet to play out. Would he risk it all for a chance to rewrite not just his company's destiny, but his own? With unresolved tension tingling in his chest, Ethan confronted a familiar battle ahead. The fear of acceptance loomed once again. Would he be ready for it? And more importantly, could he fully embrace authenticity amidst the pressure? Ethan walked lost in thought, past the busy desks, feeling the electric buzz of uncertainty that still lingered from the meeting. He had put his vision out and faced the pushback head-on, but the resolution that followed still felt tenuous. Each conversation felt like a delicate thread he was weaving in the fabric of change, yet it could just as easily unravel at any moment. He took a deep breath and paced toward his office. His mind was a chaotic storm of possibilities. Was he truly prepared for leadership? He often thought of the silent voices, the ones that gnawed at him when he least expected it. Confidence felt like a fragile facade he could shatter if anyone poked hard enough. It wasn't just about convincing his team, but convincing himself he had the right to lead them. Settling into his chair, he looked around his office, its walls lined with accomplishments, awards, accolades, and framed team pictures that represented victories he had shared with others. But each reminder of success now felt almost accusatory, as if they were pointing out the very thing he feared. Was he capable of forging a new path? The stakes had risen. He had ignited a fire that could either burn brightly or consume them all. Over the next few days, doubts crept in during unexpected moments. The whisper of skepticism during coffee breaks. The sidelong glances from colleagues in meetings. Each silent judgment seemed to amplify his insecurities. How would they handle a shift away from data-driven decisions? Was it really worth risking his reputation on this approach? In a bid to gather his thoughts, Ethan decided to seek advice outside his usual circle. He reached out to Julia, knowing she would challenge him to confront his fears head-on. As they met for coffee, he spoke about his vision and the pushback. "I feel like I'm walking a tightrope," he confessed, stirring his drink absently. "One false move and I'll fall flat. How do I balance being authentic without losing control?" "Ethan," Julia replied, her eyes intent on his, "you're already on the journey of authenticity. Embrace the discomfort. Leadership is not about being right. It's about being real. You won't get everyone on board, but the ones who matter will resonate with your truth. Her words settled in his chest. Rather than a shield to protect him, he was learning to view authenticity as a lantern guiding him through the fog. He didn't have to be faultless, he merely needed to be relatable. Inspired, he began to shape his approach moving forward, prioritizing transparency over approval. He organized open office hours to foster dialogue with the team and shifted the focus to practical examples of success rooted in authenticity. This would be his chance not just to prove a point, but to create a space where voices were valued, including his own. As Ethan actively engaged with his colleagues, he witnessed snippets of their passion emerge, but the underlying strain persisted. Resistance remained, buried beneath habitual thinking patterns and conditioned responses. The true test awaited him, when a week later he decided to present a revised framework during a team meeting, one that demonstrated how unfinished thoughts could lead to innovative breakthroughs. He sensed the tension rise as Brian's familiar skepticism surfaced once more. And what happens if this backfires? Are we ready for that fallout? Ethan's heart raced. It was a moment of reckoning. He could deflect or engage in this questioning, drawing on the balancing act he had worked through with Julia. Taking a steadying breath, he leaned into the tension. Backfiring is a part of learning. What if we found ways to capture that as part of our growth? The room fell silent. Ethan felt the weight of eyes on him, probing, weighing his conviction. Would they embrace the vulnerability inherent in growth, or retreat into the safety of the tried and true metrics? In that charged moment, Ethan made a vow to himself. He would face what lay ahead with courage, opening the floor to explore this uncertainty together, allowing for the possibility of what lay beyond fear. As he prepared to invite feedback, a realization hummed through him. This gamble was a leap into the unknown, and while he fluttered between doubt and determination, the leap was necessary. The stakes were high, and he now understood that vulnerability could redefine their collective journey. But just as he gathered his thoughts, Sarah raised her hand once more, her expression turning serious. But Ethan, isn't there a risk that if we don't measure quickly enough, we could lose everything? Tension coiled tightly in the air as her words hung over the room. The moment stretched, and with it, Ethan felt another layer of fear unfurl within him. One that not only questioned their approach, but sought to scrutinize his very desire to lead. Would he stand firm in the uncertain tide, or would he sink with the weight of it all? As he opened his mouth to respond, the lights flickered, casting shadows on the walls, mirroring the flicker of doubt within him. Would he make the right decision? Could he adapt as challenges arose? The path toward authentic leadership was blurred ahead, and in that instant he was unsure of what awaited him. Ethan took a moment, the silence lingering like a spell over the room. This was his moment to respond, to assert control in the midst of escalating doubt. But Sarah's question echoed painfully, a reminder of the risky waters he was wading into. In the midst of tension, he allowed silence to stretch, observing the faces in the room. The uncomfortable stillness fueled his resolve. "Sarah, you raise a valid point," he began, his voice steady as he scanned the team. "But what if I told you that sometimes the metrics we rely on to gauge success may blind us to true potential? We risk stagnation if we never allow ourselves to experiment, to stumble and learn." Ethan felt a refreshing rush as he acknowledged the truth of his thoughts. He wasn't alone in this. He could lead by positioning uncertainty alongside opportunity. Instead of fearing failure, what if we viewed our data not as shackles but as beacons to guide us through unexplored paths? A flicker of curiosity replaced some skepticism in the eyes around the room. Ethan sensed he had nudged open the door ever so slightly. "Let's pilot this idea, starting with a small project. Use what we already know and allow ourselves to expand. If we fail, we'll document it as a lesson learned," he added, leaning forward as if to share a secret. "We'll share our findings, success or not. Openness is our greatest asset." As the meeting progressed, he felt the team's energy shift from antagonism to engagement. They began exploring contingencies together, brainstorming how to measure risks effectively while embracing a culture of exploration. Brian, previously the most critical, jumped in, suggesting metrics that could track progress without suffocating creativity. It felt exhilarating. That evening, Ethan couldn't shake the sense of achievement as he drove home, clarity replacing confusion. He had taken a step toward leading with authenticity, even in the face of criticism. But doubt still loomed like a dark cloud. What if his idea ultimately failed? What if he had misjudged the team's readiness for this shift? In the quiet of his living room later that night, he stared out the window, peering at the moon hanging low in the sky, its light oddly comforting. The inner storms of doubt receded a little, but sharp questions persisted. This wasn't just an experiment. He was redefining his legacy, pressing against the edges of comfort. Ethan gathered his notes, jotting down insights from the meeting. With each word, he was rebuilding his confidence. He had a unique ability to identify collective potential, yet it also pressed painfully against the fear of failure. After all, if things didn't unfold as planned, he may not only put his job on the line. A gnawing pit in his stomach reminded him that more was at stake. The fear of being wrong sat heavy as a stone. He paced, deliberating, yet another aspect tickled at the back of his mind. The realization that he was not just a leader, but also a learner. Failure didn't mean the end. It could fuel growth. Embracing this duality felt empowering despite his lingering uncertainties. With renewed determination, Ethan made a plan. Tomorrow, he would gather the team to outline specific goals for their new project and work together to create a supportive environment, a safe space for innovation. No more solitary battles. Collaboration would be the cornerstone of their journey. Yet insecurity still curled beneath his skin as he braced himself for the feedback he might receive tomorrow. The stakes were exceptionally high, but so too was the potential for discovery, growth, and transformation. Would he maintain this newfound momentum, or would the relentless waves of doubt drag him back into deeper waters? As he reached for his phone to send a message to Julia, his hand hesitated over the screen. A thought fluttered in his mind, sudden and unwelcome. But what if tomorrow held not just the potential for success, but an unexpected challenge that tested everything he had committed to so far? The thought sent a shiver down his spine as he turned off the lights and slipped into bed, the night heavy with promises unmade and paths yet to emerge. What awaited him on the other side of this unrestricted growth? Would the risks he took draw them closer, or shroud them in an unbreachable gulf? Ethan awoke the next morning with a knot in his stomach, the previous night's apprehensions waiting for him like uninvited guests. As he made his coffee, he replayed the meeting in his mind, the tentative excitement mingling with trepidation. Today was pivotal. It was the day he would bring his vision into clearer focus. Arriving at the office, the world outside felt oddly muted, as if nature sensed the weight of potential change hanging in the air. Ethan's initial optimism plunged slightly as he crossed the threshold into the familiar space of cubicles and conference rooms. Each corner meant to encourage collaboration, but often felt stifled under layers of routine. He squared his shoulders, reminding himself that breakthroughs never emerged from complacency. Setting up for the team meeting, he noticed how the atmosphere was already charged with anticipation. Faces were partially visible through the glass walls, a patchwork of expressions reflecting varying degrees of interest and skepticism. It was a microcosm of his challenge, and this realization gave him a sense of determination. He was there to invite them into the unknown. As the team gathered, Ethan felt the pressure of every gaze directed at him. He welcomed them, his voice steady despite the internal throbbing of doubt. Today, I want to articulate our objectives clearly and hear your thoughts. This isn't just about results. It's about the journey we're willing to embark upon together. He could feel the air shift, a collective inhale of cautious hope. First, let's break down the project stages, he continued, outlining the phases they would tackle. As he laid out the timeline, he noticed Sarah listening intently, her earlier skepticism now replaced by curiosity. This was a small victory worth savoring. Just as he felt momentum building, Brian raised a hand. I get the idea of experimentation, but do we have the bandwidth for potential failures? What if this backfires? His tone wasn't accusatory, but conveyed genuine concern. This was it. The moment of truth had arrived. Ethan took a deep breath, grappling with the question. We must prepare for setbacks. They'll happen, but rather than dismiss them, we'll analyze them to gain understanding. That's where real growth lies. The weight of his words hung in the air, and Ethan could sense a shift. A subtle yet profound acknowledgement of the vulnerability tied to their initiative. He pressed further. What if we redefine failure together, not as an endpoint but a stepping stone? The ensuing silence felt heavy, but charged with unresolved tension. It was then that Julia, typically quiet during discussions, spoke up. The fear of failure isn't what holds us back. It's the fear of judgment. If we can create a space where mistakes aren't shamed, we might unlock new possibilities. Ethan's heart raced. Julia's observation had struck a chord, and he realized that fear of judgment lurked not just in a single individual, but had quietly woven itself through the entire team. He was beginning to see the intricate layers of hesitation that stifled the creativity he sought to unleash. Exactly, he replied, energized by her insight. Imagine if we treated each stumble as part of our growth narrative. Mistakes would not correct our paths, they would illuminate them. Encouragement blossomed among his team, glimmers of acceptance and commitment replacing initial resistance. Discussions deepened, revealing not only apprehensions but also the unbridled potential that began to emerge within their collective mindset. Yet as progress became palpable, Ethan couldn't shake the gnawing doubt that remained lodged in the pit of his stomach. What if he had unearthed wounds long buried in the team, unprepared for the emotional landscape this exploration could traverse? The possibility of resistance, of emotional fallout from pushing boundaries, loomed over him like an impending storm. As the conversation continued, he noticed signs of enthusiasm overshadowed by a quiet struggle among some members. Were they ready for the vulnerability he was asking of them? With each passing moment, Ethan realized he was not just reshaping his project plans. He was hacking at the root of his leadership style. He was beginning to understand that true leadership requires not just vision, but sensitivity to the intricacies of human fear and ambition. Exiting the meeting room later, he felt exhilarated yet unsteady, an unpredictable terrain unfolding before him, one that was ripe with potential but equally riddled with inherent risks of emotional candidness. Was the team's growth and creativity worth the potential fallout? Would they weather the waves of uncertainty together? As he pondered these questions, a knock disrupted his thoughts. He opened the door to find Sarah standing there, a determined look fixed on her face. I need to talk to you about something important. It's about how we can sustain this momentum and overcome the personal fears lurking behind our goals. Ethan felt the walls close in, knowing that Sarah's upcoming revelation might unravel the discussions that had just begun. A confrontation of their own fears tethered to the larger vision. Would he be prepared for what lay ahead? Suddenly the lingering questions grew heavier, igniting a new current of anxiety in his mind. What lay beneath the surface, and how deep would the struggle go? Ethan sat across from Sarah, the office around them bustling as his heart raced with anticipation and concern. Each beat echoed a question. Were the ideas shared in the meeting as resilient as he hoped? Sarah's resolve locked his attention, and he recognized the pivotal moment they were about to navigate together. Thank you for meeting with me, she began, her voice steady yet laced with urgency. I think we need to address something crucial. The pushback might stem from fear, not just from a personal standpoint, but from a corporate culture that's used to measuring success in black and white. Ethan sat forward, captivated. What are you suggesting? She took a deep breath. We need to create a safety net where everyone feels their voices are heard and valued, regardless of how their ideas align with the new vision. We must not only dismantle outdated metrics, but also ensure that everyone knows their worth, individual and collective. The pressure to conform to what's familiar can stifle innovation. Her words resonated deeply within Ethan. He realized that their challenge wasn't solely about redefining success. It was about nurturing an environment that celebrated vulnerability and creativity. Absolutely, he replied, feeling the spark of inspiration igniting within him. Let's implement regular feedback sessions, but not just top-down. It needs to be horizontal and encourage everyone to share their viewpoints openly. As they brainstormed how to create a culture focused on transparency and shared learning, Ethan found a profound sense of purpose emerging. The pressure began to lift, replaced by a clarity he had long sought. The fear that had plagued him transformed into an eagerness to foster an open dialogue. Together, they formulated a plan to develop a multi-layered forum where fears could be aired, vulnerabilities expressed, and collective growth celebrated. Days turned into weeks, and their initiative progressively unfolded. Each meeting created more space for transparency and dialogue, dissolving fears that had loomed over the team. When they launched their first open feedback session, Ethan felt ripples of anxiety coursing through him. Would this embrace of vulnerability endure? As employees began to share openly, encouraging laughter blended with uncomfortable silences, yet there was an underlying shift in the room. It was invigorating to witness how trust was built layer by layer. Ethan understood he was no longer shaping just a project, but fostering a movement toward a more authentic form of leadership that resonated with deep-seated values. Julia's voice echoed in his mind. True leadership is about being real. He was learning to live that truth. With each session, he observed colleagues shedding apprehensive facades, revealing passions and aspirations ignited by the newfound space. Sarah's initial fears transformed into an active advocacy for cultivating creativity and risk-taking. Ideas previously unacknowledged blossomed into innovative projects that sparked an entirely new competitive edge for their team. However, not all responses were unanimous. Doubts still surfaced from those who resisted change. Ethan encountered Brian again, whose skepticism had not faded entirely. You know, this approach may not work for everyone. Some people thrive under traditional structures. Are we risking too much? He probed, his expression earnest. Ethan paused, the weight of the challenge settling over him. Perhaps we are. But what is the alternative? Staying stagnant in a model that stifles potential? It's a risk I'm willing to take. As the days passed, Ethan began to notice his self-doubt morphing into renewed confidence. The culture they were building demanded authenticity, so he embraced it wholeheartedly, becoming vulnerable with his team about his past insecurities. As he shared candidly about his own grind for traditional success, he connected with his colleagues on deeper levels. Their shared struggles bridged the gaps he once perceived, making way for a powerful symbiosis of ideas. Then came the day of their first big project review since implementing these changes. Nervous excitement thrummed through the air as Ethan prepared to present before upper management. A chance to showcase not just their results, but the transformative journey they had undertaken. Each point he made was predicated not solely on financial metrics, but on team innovation and collaborative spirit. He encapsulated the benefits of their renewed approach, presenting not just numbers, but testimonies reflecting the vitality of internal culture. Ethan realized this was no longer a presentation to defend, it was an invitation to join a movement. As he finished, a profound silence filled the room before applause erupted. A sense of pride surged within him, bolstering a deep-seated necessity for recognition of their journey. His confidence soared like a hot air balloon, but beneath it lay an unshakable clarity. This success was a collective effort, lived in the raw moments of vulnerability. It marked an evolution that transcended numerical viability. Days later, Ethan received an unexpected invitation to showcase their strategy at a national leadership conference. As he read the email, a swell of pride rushed through him. This presented not just accolades for him, but a moment to emphasize the significance of authentic leadership. In the weeks leading to the conference, he and Sarah meticulously refined their presentation. They sought to weave stories of their team's transformation, how vulnerability had hardened trust, how their refusal to be merely numbers brought a keen edge to innovation. On the day of the conference, as he stood on stage before an audience eager to learn, he was met with reverberating applause. He realized in that moment, it was no longer just about me, but the overwhelming strength of us, a palpable recognition of the journey they all shared. When he stepped off stage, elation enveloped him. Finally, Ethan sensed he had forged something remarkable. Not just success measured by traditional metrics, but a flourishing culture rooted in authenticity, creativity, and a shared vision. This was more than personal growth. This was a blueprint for unconventional leadership, igniting a ripple effect that would echo far beyond walls designated by titles or degrees. In each interaction, each creation, and each risk taken, Ethan had transformed not just his leadership, but who he was at his core. With newfound confidence radiating from him, he stepped into his future with conviction, determined to nurture this trajectory of growth. Now ready to face any challenges ahead, he had learned invaluable lessons. He understood that true success arises from embracing the chaos of authentic connection and risk, shaping a legacy that would foster inspiration across industries and generations to come. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for personal overcoming stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.